Good evening, Xavier Basketball fans. It's the RaGing X Report, and we've come to the completion of the regular season, and we're going to get ready for the Big East tournament. Musketeers stand at 17-14, finished 9-9 in the Big East, tied for third place, and earned a number 4 seed for the Big East tournament. And I'll bring in my good friend and super analyst, Bill Gabriel. How you doing, Bill?
I'm good, Jim. How are you this evening?
Great. Musketeers go 1-1 this week as we get ready for the Big East tournament. We're going to review the 2 games, look forward to a little bit about their opponent, and we'll make our picks for the tournament. And we'll review our picks we made a while back at the beginning of the conference, see how we did. But first of all, let's talk about that Butler game. At Butler 71, Xavier 66. What's your takeaways on the breaking of that 5-game winning streak?
Oh, yeah, that went into that really friendly confines of Butler's Hinkle Fieldhouse there, and wasn't quite as friendly to the Muskies as we would have liked. Their senior night, that place was rocking, and the Muskies just didn't shoot particularly well. But, man, when we talked last time, I believe, and you asked what they needed to clear up, and I said I'd take turnovers before three free throws, I wish that's the one thing they would have done a lot better. Because they only shot 11 free throws, and which wasn't enough to matter. But, man, they had 15 turnovers in that one, and that just killed them. They just couldn't get anything going offensively because as they would start, they'd turn it over. So I really think that was their downfall. I mean, they didn't shoot great, but, you know, I think they took 23 threes. They only made 7. I mean, that's not horrible for what they're taking, you know, what teams take from three-point range. But and then the second thing they didn't bring with them is they didn't bring out their box-out game. You know, 10 offensive rebounds, that led to 11 second-chance points. So the combination of the turnovers and the offensive rebounds that Butler pulled down, that was it. I mean, they just couldn't overcome those 2 huge deficits in those 2 departments.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, again, the turnovers came to bite them. They had 15 compared to only 10 for the Butler Bulldogs. And you mentioned it was senior night, and I have to, you know, they didn't play great, but I don't think they played that poorly. I still think they played pretty decent defense at times. But I have to give the Butler Bulldogs credit, especially Kamir Baldwin and Paul Jorgensen. Kamir had 24 points, and he hit some shots that I thought were just very well defended, and he got him to go down. And Paul Jorgensen had 19 points and played with a lot of energy, and that's what Coach Steele talked about in his press conference, that he just didn't feel like the Musketeers played with as much energy as Butler did, and that may have been the difference in the game.
Well, especially when you're talking about the hustle stuff, like, you know, boxing out and getting offensive rebounds. I mean, and that'll let guys, I mean, they had guys score I've never seen their name before in that game because of those offensive rebounds. So that was just huge for them.
Another factor, I don't know how much it played into the game because he still had 11 points and 8 rebounds, but Najee Marshall, of course, sprained his ankle sometime during the second half. I believe it was in the second half. Went out for a while, tried to come back. But he had been, of course, leading this onslaught of victories they've had here in the last 5 games before then, and that might have had a little bit of a factor. But, again, I think they just realized that, and Travis Steele said it, you got to come every night with lots of energy at this time of year. You're not going to get it done. And the turnovers, and if you look at it, Quentin Gooden had 6 of those turnovers. So when your point guard has that many turnovers, that you're just giving them a lot of easy baskets. So, again, it wasn't a terrible game by the Muskies. Again, I thought the defense played pretty well, but again, Butler just made more shots than them and came away with the victory. Well, going into our senior day, of course, the first news was that Najee was not playing. But talk about a senior day. The seniors stepped up.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
You get 43 points from your. I don't even want to call them. They're not really seniors. They're they're grad transfers. They're already seniors once. They're post-grads.
Players.
Yeah, they're. But man, you talk about guys. Getting guys who've already completed their college degrees, working on their masters. Most part, this is their one last chance to play basketball in the regular season on their home court for the year that it was their home court, and to come out and have the game they had. I mean, Welledge coming out and just, lighting it up from three-point line. He had 5 3-pointers, 19 total points. Castlin had 2 threes as well. And I got to looking at that. This is Welledge's best game since IUPUI, which was the first game of the year.
Yeah, and then he also had a big game up at DePaul. I think he scored 17 up there.
That was his next best game.
And talk about Ryan Welledge. It wasn't just the 3-pointers. He had a little bit of a mid-range game and drove the ball a couple times and had me wondering where's that been all year. And
there's one time he skied in for an offensive rebound around the free throw line, and it just went right back up into a jumper and drained it.
So that was again without Najee. And I think you touch on it, something we got to remember. These 3 seniors, graduate students, whatever you want to call them, the main reason they came to Xavier is because they wanted to play in the NCAA tournament. Because, of course, Hankins got to play in the Division II tournament and actually won it. But, it's got to be a little bit different. And, of course, Castlin and Welledge, they've never played in the NCAA tournament where they went to school. So you got to think that they're the ones that are maybe really pushing this and bringing the energy, because it's like, hey, guys, this is why I came here, and we got to get this done, or it's not going to happen. But what a balanced attack. And Paul Scruggs, and I've said before, Paul Scruggs, he needs to play like that every night. And it almost seems like when somebody else is out, it's when he steps it up. Remember the last time when Quentin was out for 2 games, he really had monster games and helped him win against Butler and Georgetown. And now maybe because he knew Najee was out and he needed to step it up a little bit, but 22 points and 6 rebounds. And I think he maybe had, I don't know if he had any turnovers, maybe 1. And Quentin Gooden only had 1. Even though he only scored 3 points, I'll take 3 points from Quentin Gooden any night if he only has 1 turnover.
Correct. I'll take no points and no turnovers. Just be out there and be a key defensive player and assist generator. And, if you get a chance to take it to the hole, take it, Quentin. But, man, catch and shoot 3-pointers okay, but he's got to quit with the dribbling around and pull up and chuck one routine. That's not a good 3 to take, and he's definitely not. He's struggling with those kind of shots.
10 turnovers, and that's really good considering that the Red Storm pressed a lot during that game, and that's something the Musketeers have had trouble with when they were at St. John's the last time, and then at Seton Hall. Remember they had that 17-point lead that they let them whittle it down to 1, but a lot of that was pressure at the end of the game. But they really handled the press very, very well. Only 10 turnovers against a team that likes to, mix it up. And also they controlled the pace of the game. They didn't allow St. John's to get into that up and running style that they like to play. So 3-pointers, 11 for 26. I think that probably has to be close to a high benchmark for the Musketeers. Free throws, they hit 70%, 14 of 20. So it was optimistic. It makes you think that, they can play with anybody in the Big East. And I think they showed that by putting it on the Johnnies for the second time.
Definitely.
Well, let's review our picks. I had to go back in my notes. And, of course, Musketeers finished 9-9, kept that streak alive. 37 straight seasons now, 37 or 38. They've had at least a 500 record in the league they play in. I think it's 22 years straight now. They will have a winning record. There's no way I think they could even have a 500 record because one loss to the Big East tournament and then one loss in whatever post-tournament they end up in. But, Bill, do you remember where you picked them to place and the record you said they would have?
Xavier?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I said they'd have 6 wins. They beat it by 3.
You said they would have 6 wins, and you said they would place.
Oh.
You put them at
7th?
8.
Yeah.
I picked them at 5, so I was closer to that than you, and I picked them at 9-9, where they were. We both, of course, picked Marquette to win it, and of course that didn't pan out, even though they had their shot last week and couldn't do it. We also both picked a second team, and I picked Villanova, so that played out well because they actually did win it. And you picked Seton Hall. Good pick, though. They were in that gaggle in the middle of the standings. So the final standings: Villanova 13-5, first place. Marquette 12-6. Then we have 4 teams tied for third: Georgetown, Seton Hall, Creighton, and Xavier. And Xavier gets the 4th seed, and I'm not even sure how that all panned out with that weird tiebreaker they do. St. John's 8-10, finished. What would they be? 6th. Providence, DePaul, Butler, all tied for, actually St. John's will be at 7th, and those last 3 tied for 8th place. But I don't know if you got to see any of those games, but it was crazy. Nova couldn't win at Seton Hall, though Seton Hall's playing very well right now. But then Marquette had a chance to win it, and I think they would have got the 1st seed because Xavier beat St. John's, and they couldn't win it. And, of course, then St. John's loses to X, and DePaul lost to Creighton. All right, you ready to make your picks? I've made my picks, so I'll let you do yours, and then we'll compare next week. Big East tournament starts Wednesday evening, and our non-bye games. So Butler versus Providence. Who you got in that one?
Oh, playing in New York. That's a toughie.
That is tough. They're going to be tough.
Yeah. I think I like think on that neutral court. I like Providence's chances.
Okay, you picked Providence. I had picked Butler, so that'll be different there. All right, the other playing game, so to speak, is St. John's and DePaul.
I think St. John's got a little axe to grind over the victory that DePaul had against them at their place, and they're playing in basically St. John's other home arena. So I'm gonna take the Red Storm there.
Okay, I also picked the Red Storm. All right, so back to yours. First game of the day on Thursday plays out like you predicted it. It would be Providence and Villanova.
No, I'll take Villanova.
I took Villanova too. The only difference is over Butler. Creighton and Xavier playing in the second game on Thursday.
I'm taking X.
There you go. Me too. St. John's and Marquette. First evening game on Thursday.
And I'll tell you what, it's hard to beat somebody 3 times in a row. So I'm going to have to say that Marquette's going to finally get over the snide against St. John's.
I picked them also. And final game of the evening, two teams that are playing very, very well. Both had big upsets on Saturday, taking down Marquette and Villanova. Georgetown and Seton Hall.
I think Seton Hall is a little more experienced in the backcourt, so I'm going to go with them.
Okay, I went with Georgetown, so we differ on that one. All right, let's go to the semifinals, which will be played on Friday night, and we both have Nova versus Xavier. Who you got there?
Man, I'm going to go with them until otherwise deemed. I'm going to go with X.
I thought you would, and I did too. And you're going to have Marquette versus Seton Hall.
And I think Seton Hall is trying to shore up that NCAA tournament seeding. I think they're going to actually pull off the upset there.
Okay, I went with Marquette. So in the finals, I think you probably know the answer to this, but Xavier versus Seton Hall for you, you're going to go with?
X, all the way.
We got to. They pay the bills. And I have
Sure.
Xavier versus Marquette, and I picked Xavier also, which leads into my next question here. Does Xavier get into the NCAA without winning the Big East tournament? Say they win those first 2 games and lose in the finals to Marquette or Seton Hall or Georgetown. Do they get in?
Yes, if they make it to the championship game and they got one more win over Villanova. Yeah, and I say that with it's got to be like the perfect storm of other bubble teams losing in their tournaments to people they shouldn't have lost to. A few of those, one here, one there. I can't really put specifics on it. But it never fails. And then the flip side is you can't have teams from some of those schools that they're going to be the only bid not make it to their championship games and win it. And then they start thinking, well, maybe they need to reward that other team for that good season. And you get 2 teams from that conference. That's not one of the, the top 4 or 5 conferences. So, be a darn shame if somebody out of the Pac-10 wins it. That's not one of their 2 better teams, and they take 3. Gosh, that would be the kind of thing that would hurt them. So they stand a chance, but it's got to be a perfect storm. I think they just got to take the matter into their own control and run the table.
Well, I got to disagree with you. I think even if they win 2 games and don't win it, I say they're not going to get a bid. 19 and 15 is what that would make them. Right now, their net ranking, which is supposedly what the committee looks at the most, is 71. And that's come down a little bit with that 5-game winning streak. But actually, that they were 71 going into the St. John's game, and even a victory over St. John's because it was home, I don't think counted for. St. John's had fallen out and wasn't a quadrant 1 win, so it really didn't help them. And here's the other thing that I think is going to kill them is they really have no big non-conference wins.
Correct.
I believe all their non-conference wins were at home. They were not against highly ranked opponents. You kind of kick yourself. You go back to out of Maui. If they could have beaten Auburn and seeing what Auburn's doing now, that could have possibly pushed them over the line. Remember, they had the loss at Missouri. Who else did they? San Diego State they lost to out of Maui. They just and another one, Wisconsin, which I think they lost by 6 or 8 points at home. And Wisconsin, of course, has had a pretty decent year. The top half of the Big Ten couldn't get that done. So I really think if they do not win the Big East tournament, they will not be going to the NCAA tournament. Again, it's hard to tell because there's a lot of factors and a lot of other teams that are involved now, especially some of these smaller conference. If whoever won the regular season, if they don't win their tournament and another team gets in from their league, then you got a team that maybe has a couple marquee wins and maybe they get an at-large bid taking one away from them. But it's just so hard to tell if without knowing what's going to go on. I have another question here to throw in here. Would going to the NIT be good for this Xavier team?
It's a chance to play more basketball games. It's a chance for them to, get some more. But if they were they got some super young guys that could benefit from it. I don't really think it's benefiting, Welledge and Castlin and Hankins, other than they get to play more basketball, which I'm sure they love to do. I'm sure they'll be hugely disappointed not in the NCAA tournament. But I think they would enjoy playing more basketball games because, I'd say of those three, Hankins is probably the only one who stands much of a chance of playing further as a professional. Not knowing how the Welledge stacks up for the international scene. I'd say Hankins definitely makes it there, if not outside, chance maybe somewhere else, whether the G League or something, who knows. Just because of his height for a year, they might look at him for that, see how he develops. You never know. Just a chance for them to play more basketball. I'd say it'd be good for them. If they were like a super young team, it would be a lot better just to get that experience, play more. But they're peaking right now, so I'm sure they enjoy the opportunity to play more ball. And if they buy into it and treat it as a chance to do that and have a lot of fun, it might be really good for them.
Yeah, and the other thing that has been brought up is it would probably be good for Travis Steele to get to coach a few more games this season, especially in a tournament atmosphere, so to speak. It seems that every year the NIT starts, and I think one or two things usually happens. A team who doesn't make the NCAA that was maybe on the bubble and thought maybe they were in, that first game's so important because sometimes I think they come out flat and they end up losing that first game. And, of course, that's just, more disappointment to an already disappointing season. But it seems if they get past that first game and then they kind of get over, okay, and they realize, there's, I think it take 5-6 games to win the NIT, and if they go on a run, and now you say we don't have a whole lot of young players, but you got to remember Najee and Paul Scruggs are only sophomores,
right?
So they've only, and of course they only got 2 games in last year, even though they were the number 1 seed. So yeah, it's and as Xavier fans, I kind of always look at it this way. Of course, I can't remember the last time they were in the NIT. I remember the year early on in our going to the games where they actually made it to the Final Four, I think. Played a couple games at the Gardens. Mm-hmm. Maybe 3 games at the Gardens. Yeah, because I remember them playing New York after they beat somebody in what would have been the quarterfinals. So as a Xavier fan, you always think, well, maybe I'll get a home game. Maybe they get a game against somebody like an Ohio State, who I think might be on the outside of the NCAA, might get an NIT bid, get a home game with Ohio State. That would maybe pique some interest here in Ohio.
The chat rooms were talking up a Dayton Xavier matchup in the NIT.
Yeah, I think Dayton's kind of mid-pack in the A10 and probably not going to make the NCAA unless they make a run in the tournament. And, of course, yeah, Dayton Xavier, that brings interest anyway, right? We can renew that rivalry and make sure that we can keep it. Who was president the last time that Dayton won that? Dayton won in
my
Cincinnati.
Gosh.
That's what it is. That's not your trivia question, but do you remember that?
It was it Carter?
Jimmy Carter. Last time that Dayton won in Cincinnati. Now, if there's any Dayton fans listening, we know they beat Xavier up there at the UD Arena a few times. But last time they won in Cincinnati, Jimmy Carter was president. I think it was might have been right before Ronald Reagan was sworn in or something in January of 1980 or the fall, late winter of 1979. So, yeah, again, I really think just looking at that, like I say, they just don't have a key win. If they had won, if they had beaten Auburn, I think then they maybe, if they could win 2 games, beat Villanova again, I think maybe they're in. But, again, I think they got to win 3 games in New York, which I really think, if they bring it all together and play like they play, keep the turnovers down, play the defense that they've been playing, I think they got as good a shot as anyone of winning this tournament. Of course, you hear the people on the airways talking about the Big East tournament, and it's really the truth. Anybody could win this tournament. I think it's very tough if you got to play 4 games, but anybody who's playing their first game on Thursday night, I think, has a shot of winning this tournament, especially with a couple of hot teams like Georgetown and Seton Hall. They're kind of like Xavier, just playing very, very well at this time. I'll tell you what, we look toward next year. Georgetown, they're going to be scary good next year with all those freshmen that are playing.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually, and we hadn't mentioned, Najee Marshall made the second team Big East, but did I see, I think there were 3 Georgetown freshmen on that second team? Akinjo, McClung, and somebody else, one of their bigger freshmen. I think all 3 of them were on the second team Big East. So, and then you got Jesse Govan, I think, was on first team. So Georgetown's going to be good, and they've really kind of pulled it together here. Again, to go into Marquette knowing if they win that game, they basically get the number 1 seed, and Georgetown to beat them, that was a shock to me. All right.
Yeah, it was. Well, the answer to your Xavier went to the NIT last time in 99-2000. But it was the year before. Yeah, that was the year they lost to Notre Dame. The year before that was though when they went to the Final Four of the NIT and lost to Clemson. That was 98-99 with Skip Prosser. So both years with Skip, they went for his final year with Xavier. They went to the NIT. So,
all right.
Yep.
All right, here is the trivia question of the evening. In 1994-95, the Musketeers, it was their last year in the MCC, the Mid-Collegiate Conference. They were 23-3, and they went undefeated in the regular season of the MCC. So they were the regular season champs. But going into the conference tournament, they played the number 8 seed, who not only was the number 8 seed, but they were hosting the MCC tournament that year. And it was their first year in the MCC, and they upset the Musketeers 71-70. You know who that was?
In the MCC?
It was the first year this school was in the MCC, which, of course, is now the Horizon. And they hosted the MCC tournament. They were the number 8 seed, and they knocked off the number 1 seeded Musketeers in the quarterfinals, 71-70 on their home floor. I remember listening to this game. I don't even think it was on TV.
Let me think. Was it I don't even know who was in the conference to guess that all the way back then.
Give you a hint. It's an Ohio school.
Ohio
that just blew
school.
Your mind.
Do what?
I said that just blew your mind, right?
Yeah.
Ohio
okay. Yeah. Who would it have been? Was it Dayton?
Wright City.
Wright State.
Wright State. The Wright State Raiders upset the Musketeers that year 71-70 and actually made it all the way to the final game of the MCC tournament. I don't even think they had a winning record in the regular season, but of course having that home game against the Musketeers brought out a raucous crowd, and they ended up losing to Wisconsin Green Bay in the final game that year. And it's interesting because I was looking at the games on tonight. The semifinal game in the horizon tonight is Wright State and Wisconsin Green Bay. And one of your other alma maters is playing in the other game. I think Northern Kentucky's playing against Oakland. So good luck to the Norse. Well, lots of basketball to watch this week, and we're getting into what we call March Madness. All the league tournaments start this week. So we'll be watching that. We'll be back next Monday, hopefully talking about – I also the Musketeers did make the NCAA tournament that year, just for note. Here, I'll give you another one. They were an 11 seed at large out of the MCC, but they lost their first game 68-63 to a current Big East school. You know who that is?
A current Big East school.
Game was played actually in Washington, D.C.
Georgetown?
They lost to Georgetown 68-63. I do remember watching that game. So that season took a drastic turn in the quarterfinals of the league tournament, and the Musketeers that year had a great year, 23-3, and lost their last two games and didn't even make it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Well, any final thoughts before we sign off this evening?
Sure. Got throw out a big congratulations to Najee Marshall, second team All Big East, and Paul Scruggs for making the Big East weekly honor roll for his performance this past week. So that was a nice job for those two. Nice recognition.
Yep, and we're hoping maybe Najee, I saw some people talking that maybe if he continues to improve and work on his game, maybe he would even be up for a Player of the Year next year. I didn't notice, did the Big East name their Player of the Year yet or not?
I did not see that.
I didn't either. Maybe that comes later. So I saw the first and second team, and then you know what it was? That's what it was. They had an all-freshman team, and there were 3 Georgetown players on that. They weren't on second team. They were on the all-freshman team. But again, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. Well, we would like to thank Mike Goodpaster and the Girling Truth Network for putting our broadcast out there, and we will end our broadcast as we do always by saying, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.